made mightier without roids.
Yes, we are back to this damn show. My editor hates me, but I won't stop talking about these three. We're talking about Steven Universe again because it's the best show on television. I'm not joking. This time I'm coming at you not with an analysis, but really a theory. You see, a recent episode that came out led me to think about something that I hadn't really considered before. Let's talk about the episode Monster Reunion, where Steven reunites with Centipedal, who is one of the very first enemies that he encounters. We learn a lot from this episode, but you gotta pay real close attention if you want to put it all together. I'm going to talk to you about what I built out of this episode. So in this episode, Steven ends up regaining his power of healing spit. If you didn't know he had healing spit, you need to watch more of this show. Basically, he's got spit that if it touches an object, animate or inanimate, it can put it back together. It can fix things. The gems, of course, being constructs of light that come from gemstones, can be repaired as to such, but Steven's healing spit had not been powerful enough for them to try it on one of the monsters that remained captured at the heart of their abode. So now, in this episode, we deal with Steven's attempts to save some of the corrupted gems that have become the monsters that Steven and his crew combat on a weekly basis. He tries this with Centipedal, the monster that he had managed to tame Pokemon style, and it's not lost on the creators. Look at that Pokeball gem. Look at it. Just look at it. Beautiful. Steven uses his spit on Centipedal's gem in order to try and make her whole again. This ends up repairing Centipedal's humanoid form mostly, but it still doesn't work entirely. And as Garnet explains,
sort of like if MC Bear Bear didn't tear the fabric of his arm, but the fabric of his mind.
Sounds pretty explained to me.
Yep, Amethyst. Sounds pretty explained to me too. Then, Steven manages to coax a story out of Centipedal to find out what Centipedal remembers exactly. The story spans from the inception of the invasion of Earth, from when the gems first sent out their ships full of gemstones to be able to colonize the Earth. They land, they take over, they build, and then the war. The war at the core of which is Steven's mother, Rose Quartz, fighting with her allies to defend the Earth against Homeworld, their very people. A civil war in which her and her allies end up combating every gem that they've known and loved from Homeworld and disobeying direct orders at the cost of many a life. At the end, Centipedal is ordered to return to the ship to evacuate. When Centipedal gets lost and fails to do this, Centipedal is caught up in a blast of some kind, a mysterious white light described as a noise or a song. We are talking massive catastrophe. We are talking a war-ending blow. The nuclear option that destroys friend and foe alike. The wrath of God of the Steven Universe world, as it were. And it doesn't leave many survivors. This trauma awakens the corruption inside Centipedal. Talking about all of this with Steven causes her to lose control, to vomit acid, and to start transforming back into her bestial state. Like Garnet said, it's the tear in her mind widening, turning her back into her bestial state as memories awaken and trauma is made fresh and new. And then we see that she can't use the warp pad. Steven gets her to the ship and she tries fruitlessly to use the door to the ship to get to her allies. Steven has to open it for her, and then once inside, she realizes that they're as corrupted as she is, showing that her gems all achieved a similar corrupted state. Like all gems of a certain class can be corrupted the same way. And then beyond that, they leave Centipedals, all of them, trapped, unbubbled, in the ship. Trapped, you say, oh no, they just left them there to live in peace. No, they didn't. Garnet even says it. The ship is their bubble now, because they can't use the doors. They can't use the technology. It's a cage. A cage that they can no more open than I could, or you. Future Vision tells her that they aren't going to be getting out. Not anytime soon. I want to talk about the implications of this moment before we go any further. This kind of attack is not something anybody does lightly. Even if they thought the world was worthless, they probably still wouldn't use such a devastating attack unless it was necessary. Especially since they still stood to gain so much from the Earth and its resources. An attack like that is pretty much only used if a show of force is absolutely necessary. If to avoid doing that would be to sacrifice too much. If your opponents have a chance to win, and it is literally the only thing you can do to stop them. Whatever the case may be, we have to assume that the crystal gems had the upper hand here. Something had given them the strength they needed to scare the Diamond Authority into using, basically, the here-all, end-all weapon. So let's talk about the effects of the song bomb, as it were. Sure, there's the implication of some serious physical damage that happened, but gems don't suffer physical damage. At least not really. And they don't talk about the gems being shattered by this. Centipedal is still whole, just corrupted. So the damage physical is probably not what this is going for. Well, we'll strike that one from the list. Rose and her generals are still alive, so it didn't shatter them, so it must not be what they were going for there either. And the gem soldiers were corrupted. Now see, this is interesting, because if this song thing, that noise, was literal, gemstones can resonate with noise. They can resonate with sound, and vibrations like that can leave a lasting imprint on a gemstone. Maybe even what you would call a corruption. Whatever the case, the gemstones that are corrupted are left in a bestial state, removed of their higher brain functions for the most part, and the longer they stay in this state, the worse off they become. But in addition to simply being converted into weapons that could be pointed at their opponents, now stronger from the radiation, as it were, that mutates them into these beasts, it also denies them the ability to use gem-based tech, as we see Centipedal struggle with not only the warp, but the door to her very ship. None of it works in her altered state. And so because of that, she is denied all the benefits, all of the gemanity of their kind. She is made into a monster. She is made into a beast. Little more than a bug. This could be their here-all, end-all for disobedience. For people that turn on them. As a show of force saying, yes, you can choose to rebel. If you do, we'll hit you with the song. And if we hit you with the song, you won't even be you anymore. You won't be able to be used for the reason that you were born. You won't be able to use our tech. And you won't be able to go home. You will be an animal, divorced from our society, and left to scrounge for yourself until madness causes your gem to shatter. But it would certainly explain why Peridot freaks out so much at the fact that she rebelled. Why so many people like Ruby and Sapphire freak out when they realize that they have disobeyed an order, or that they've done not what was expected of them. Being shattered is a terrible punishment, but this is a torture. This is a physical and mental destabilization that is somehow far worse than just death. So, assuming that this is the effect of the song bomb on the gems that happen to be in the area, it obviously didn't affect our protagonists. What's the deal there? Well, you have to assume that the temple fusion, also known as the big goddess-like statue that Stephen lives in now, was the state of Garnet, Amethyst, Pearl, and Rose fused together, combating the Diamond Authority. And as we know, Rose and her, homies, basically, can bubble as a defensive mechanism and also as a form of restraint. The song was coming in Rose, if not also Pearl and Garnet, who we can also see bubbling on several occasions, defended themselves from the blast. It could be that they lost every other ally that they had. All the allies that weren't adept at fusion or that fused with something else. Anyone who couldn't bubble to protect themselves. Corrupted. This blow would have crippled Rose's forces and left them high and dry, stranded for people, and unable to pursue. Why? Because now they have to recalibrate their forces, bubble their friends to keep them from becoming something that they'd have to poof, shatter, break. If they want to be able to keep their allies, protect them, and hold their life as precious as Rose Quartz did for all things, they would have to destabilize, which could even have destabilized the fusion. As we've seen, trauma can break apart a fusion, and the more minds are in a fusion, the harder it is to maintain a fusion of that kind. That kind of gross mental trauma of seeing your allies all transformed and destroyed would certainly destabilize a fusion like that. And then their goals would suddenly be very, very different than they were just minutes ago. There's a lot of gems bubbled at the Gem Heart. I'm talking a lot of gems. I think that they bubbled their allies in order to keep them from becoming monsters. I think they started putting gems in bubbles as a way to keep them from becoming something far worse. And I know what you're thinking, like, of course they bubble, and bubbling is a thing. It's not just a thing. It's something Rose can do. It's something Pearl has learned to do. It's something Garnet can do. We've never seen Amethyst bubble. We've never seen Peridot bubble. We've never seen Jasper bubble. And we have seen instances where those characters bubbling would have been handy. Think about when they knocked out all of the gems and we're going to take them back to Homeworld at the end of the first season. They put them in cells. But if they were bubbled, they wouldn't have even been allowed to reform until they were at home, ready to stand trial. Instead, they threw their gems in a box, let them reform, and hoped for the best. Because of that, they nearly lost everything, including their lives. I think if Jasper or Peridot could have bubbled, they would have. But they can't, because they just don't know how. So now, with that little bit of presumption, we know how the Temple Goddess managed to survive the onslaught caused by the Song Bomb. We know why the Crystal Gems and their allies couldn't pursue. And we know why this mission has been so sacred to them. They're trying to keep their kind from having to suffer any more of the horrors of the war that they themselves caused. In a way, I'm sure they all feel responsible for their transformations, because if they hadn't rebelled, this never would have happened. So now that we've analyzed all of this, we see some of the traumas left behind by the Gem War. We see the desperate last-ditch attack that the Diamond Authority was willing to commit in order to preserve their order. And we see some of the consequences of the Crystal Gem's actions. If this is the case, corruption is somehow far worse than I had ever even realized before. Your friendly weekly reminder that this is a kid's show. Whew. So what do you guys think? Do you guys think that's actually what the Song Bomb did? Do you think that corruption is somehow far worse than we had realized before? I want to know all of your Steven Universe thoughts and theories in the comments. Let's talk about it. Let's try and break this show down and understand so much more than the creators want us to. Oh man, I love this show. Much to my editor's disdain, I'm sure we'll be talking about Steven Universe again here relatively soon. It's something I just can't stay away from. But until then, Crystal Gems, stay formed, and we'll see you next week on Pen Made Mightier. Bye now.
Pen made mightier without royalty.